I don't want consistent wine because my life is not consistent. My year is not the same last year or this year, right? We are getting older, we feel differently, we want different things, we want more of this and less of that. Why my wine should be the same year after year, right? I want this excitement of opening the bottle and don't know what to expect and let it surprise me.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today, beautiful Southern California, here on a October day. About to have a conversation with Diana Khandilyan. Introductions in just a minute. You got to pay attention. I was just looking at a video I put out with Violet Gergich. Her father was the founder of Gergich Hills Winery, of course, the famed winemaker who made the Chardonnay in 1973 that won the Judgment of Paris. It's a great conversation, our second time around on the show. And so have a listen to that, but not while we're here. We're here to have a multi-talented conversation with multi-talented Diana Kandiglian. She is an energy expert in soils and terroir as her day job, but she's a certified sommelier as well as founding the Pour Across America Wine Club. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Paul.
We had a brief conversation before just to sort of understand where we're coming from on this thing. And it sounded so interesting because I found you, so to speak, on LinkedIn. You had written an article about the volcanic terroir of Armenia.
Yeah.
And it spawned an interest because you, at that moment, at least on LinkedIn, your trade was more about geophysiology. What do you call it?
Geophysics.
Geophysics.
Yes.
And the impact of that. And that's what you do every day, basically.
Yes.
So tell me. Go ahead.
I was trained as an oil and gas geophysicist, and that's what I did for over 20 years across the world. So it is a very interesting profession because you need to understand a lot of physics, but also to understand what rocks do and how they react and how we can read them, right? So basically, our job is to read the rocks and understand what is happening, where are they coming from, what they create for us as a human being in terms of energy.
That's, you just spawned a thought. I got to ask you this question, and then we'll dig into that. But friends of mine invested in a gold mine in Texas, and it was all based on, I don't know the science of it, but they haven't hit anything, of course, and it's been years since they started drilling. Is that even possible to predict something like gold in the ground based on what, surface soil or core samples? Is that?
It is possible. It's not that easy, but it is possible. Basically, if you have a lot of it in one place, then yes, we have methods. Think about when you go to ultrasound or other types of gamma rays or anything that you scan your body with. So we do the same for the soil. And if there is a lot of that thing in one place, then we probably will detect it, yes. For oil and gas, it's harder because we need to go significantly deeper under the ground, but yeah.
See, I kind of asked that question because my friends do listen to this, and I want them to know that they got accolades, if not, just because they invested in a gold mine and the proverbial, gold mine. So, how did you do this? You're born in Armenia, or were you born in?
Yes, I was born in Armenia, and when I was born, it was still Soviet Union. And halfway through my adolescence, Soviet Union got dissolved. And fortunately, we had very big earthquake in Armenia that put us in a bad shape in terms of energy supply, precisely. So after several years of fighting it and not being able to go to school in the winter because it's cold, my family decided to move to Moscow. And this is where I finished the school and got to Oil and Gas University and get my bachelor and master degree there.
Wow. And how old were you when that happened?
I was born in 1979, so.
Oh, well, I didn't want to push you on the spot for that, but.
No, we moved to Moscow in 1993, so I was 14.
So was this interest in soil and rock and geophysics spawned from the earthquake? It was 1988, right?
Yeah, so it's actually a very interesting question because if you ask me at the time, I would say no. But looking back, everybody who have been in Armenia will notice that the only thing we have is rocks, right? The rocks are around you everywhere. The mountains are around you. There is nowhere you can look not to see beautiful mountains. It can be Ararat Mountain, our iconic landmark, or it can be Aragat's Mountain. It can be any mountain, but there's mountains everywhere. And the most beautiful about it is they are different. The rocks are different. The obsidians everywhere are different, and the composition of the rocks are different. So, although I cannot say that I went to study this because I was in love with rocks, but rocks were part of my life for sure, right?
Well, one of the first things I ever collected as a kid, and I'm certainly not a specialist in any of this, was obsidian. And Armenia is rife with obsidian, at least in certain districts, and it's such a
Yeah.
beautiful stone.
And it's so diverse, right?
Yeah, and I wanted to bring some home, but I guess it's a rather substantial penalty for trying to sneak obsidian out of the country.
Oh, no, you can buy it. If you go to the vernissage or somewhere, you can buy a piece of it and then you can bring it.
Oh, you can?
Yeah,
I thought I was going to be arrested at the airport. Ernakian was going to arrest me or something.
no, they will not.
Does- Why we're on the subject, does wine grow in that kind of soil?
You know about wine more than I do, but wine grows in the places where nothing else does, right?
Right.
And sometimes you look at the Armenian hills and you think, how on earth something can grow there? Because it's all ash or it's all big rocks, and somehow we built because there is no other way. It's not just to grow this beautiful, beautiful RNE wines or Woskyhart grapes, and it's amazing actually because in some places, I mean, most of the Armenia is ungrafted still, right? So
Mhm.
it's pretty unique in the world. Most of it is dry farming. We don't have water to irrigate them. We don't have that much energy and electricity to bring water there. So if it rains, good. If it doesn't, well. So it is actually like nature phenomenon, I think, in Armenia.
That's an interesting thought. That you just thought of because the argument goes on about where wine started, and hell, you could probably find remnants of fermented grapes, that are maybe older than even the Armenian intact winery. But regardless, there's that argument that wine started in the Caucasus. The Armenians like to take credit for it. I listened to the ARPA thing the other day, and they're talking about, well, there wasn't even an Armenia when that winery was established, so you really can't say that. But let's just suffice it to say that it was in the Caucasus area where wine started as a consumable product for humanity. I mean,
Yeah,
we all know that Noah landed the ark and planted grapes, etc.
yeah.
But what you just said is fascinating because it's naturally sustainable, and this whole deliberate movement across the world in wine. And I think wine is one of the great products of the world that can lead itself to sustainability, but it's already naturally sustainable in Armenia. There's no water. It has to grow deep. It's almost inventably organic because of that, at least biodynamic to the extent of, you only have so many days or certain days that you can do things because of the fact there's no water. I never thought of that before. Is that significant in your mind when it comes to the soil and the way Armenian wines propagate themselves and the fact they've been there for so long and they still survive?
Yeah, we are facing a couple of crises, wine crises this day, right? One is about the consumption, but the other one is about it's getting hotter and hotter every day, every year, and in a typical grapes that were growing in certain location 20 years ago are struggling today. And if you think about the old world with appellations, with very strict rules that simply don't allow you to adapt, it is becoming problem, right? So one thing that growers are trying to do is going higher in elevation if they have that elevation. Now think about Bordeaux. There is not much you can do. There is no elevation there, right? Others are trying to pick earlier, not let grapes to ripen that much, and then etc. Armenia is pretty interesting in that way because, as you said, we are probably the oldest place in the world that made wine, but we are also very, very young, right?
Mhm.
And this is an interesting paradox because we can find 150 years old vines in Armenia that probably were not producing very good wine for 100 years. And then in the last couple of decades, we have entrepreneurs that came, Armenian heritage that came from all around the world to build this industry from scratch with knowledge, with understanding, and with great respect and love to what they do and our soil, right? So there's two things. One is our crop resilience. They have been through everything in the last 6,000 years, right? There was a global warming, there was almost like mini ice ages, everything happened in the last 6,000 years. And the wine is still there. So, on that point of view, I think our wines can adapt, as Armenian people do as well, right? On the other side, if we keep this industry as it is right now, I'm frankly in love with the state of our industry today, which is relatively small. They are all small producers. They deeply care about what they do. If we keep it this way, Armenia will be one of the few countries that can give this boutique wine experience with a taste of terroir, without heavy machinery, without pesticides, and attending to, if it's not fully biodynamic, but attending to clean practices, sustainable practices, and this feel of, homemade food or homemade wine. Somebody made it for you. It's not just there on a shelf.
You know, you said a mouthful there, and I want to retract it a little bit for the listeners. Well, it's important stuff because it makes you, when I hear it coming from you, a scientist who's involved with geophysics, it adds an extra element of complexity, and not only to the conversation, but the wine. If you think about Armenia's old world problem, the fact that it's old world is 6,000 years old. We all talk about the suspension of the industry, so to speak, for 75 years with the Soviet rule. But so that makes it old world. But then we've done so much in the recent years that you can call it new world. It's not plagued with the appellation rules that Bordeaux and Burgundy and those places of the world have. So that gives it a new world sense because you can plant whatever you want. But there is an identity crisis going on, and I've heard it many, many times from different vintners that there's that staunch Armenian pride that we're not going to grow anything but indigenous varieties, which is perfectly fine. There's plenty of them. And then there's the what's the world drinking? And wine is, let's face it, wine's consumer driven, and they drink Chardonnay and Cabernet and Merlot, and those are the big grapes. And so why aren't we planting those? And that argument will go on. But what you said lends itself to eventually the quality of the wine in the sense of its complexity. Because, wow, we have all this tradition and these old vines that are going to produce this character that you can't find anywhere else in the world. And that's going to be blended with newer technologies to make wines that extract their character. And all of a sudden, we've got layers of complexity that are going to show up in these wines. Maybe not quite yet, but there are a few. That's going to be rather dramatic.
This is a conversation that I think we will go on and on around the world. But I would strongly advocate for some appellation type rules in Armenia. And I'll tell you why. Yes, we need to protect our indigenous grapes. Yes, we need to protect this very careful winemaking practices that emerge naturally. Nobody forced these winemakers to do it. They were doing it because this is the right way to do. But also, I'm sure in California and Texas, we don't have that. We don't see that much. But in California, you probably see a new Armenian wine producer every day on the shelf, right? So there's a joke around like every Petros now have winemaking facility or growing grapes. That can be a problem. I'm not saying it is yet, but that can be a problem because if we start to do what world has done 20, 30 years ago for the new world, we will be in the same troubles as everybody else now. And what is that? It's a clonal selection. it's pesticides, it's herbicides, is choosing the sites that are producing more grapes and eventually more wine rather than good wines or reduced yields, and it's easy, right, to jump into this because hey, Zulal is producing, I don't remember how many thousand bottles, but it's very small and it's incredibly good and it has such a reputation, right? So if I introduce a bottle of Zulal to one of my friends, they would see another Armenian wine, they will go buy it, and I'm not sure they will like it. So I
No.
would want to keep this good because we can, right? We are a small country. We are very limited resources and we can keep it very, very small and boutique.
No,
On
it's
the other
interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, on the other side, what you said, Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs, and yes, but also no. How much more Chardonnay do we need? Do we need Chardonnay from Armenia? I don't need Chardonnay from Armenia. I'm happy with Kangun. I'm happy with Voskehat, well done, well made. Um, I don't know. I think and when I say we, unfortunately, it falls into people like you and I and our diaspora that we should make sure that world knows about our wines. That in WSET or Court of Master Sommelier books, there is a mention of Armenia, which today is not. I just completed the course and it struck me as terrible because not even once we talked about Armenia or Armenian heritage or the cradle of the world or, here's a wine and try to drink it. I took it on myself to organize events, bring Armenian wines to the people and make sure even at the WSET school, they know, you know.
Well, I had this goes back many years actually, and this is how slow the industry is. And I have comments on what you just said, a couple of them. But um, one master somm, Emmanuel Comigi, who makes wine in Terroir, Spain, I've said this on the show before, was visiting California years ago. I'm talking about 10 years ago, probably. And he went to Sacramento, the famed Corti Brothers market and wine shop. Daryl Corti is one of the world-renowned experts on Madeira and port. And Daryl brought out an Armenian wine. Emmanuel did not tell me which one it was on this podcast, but as a somm, and that's you studied and you got your certification, he said to himself, wow, this is really good. And now I need to learn about this as an academian in the world of wine. As a master somm, I need to learn about Armenia. Because when he went through the master somm test in 1996, South America was like the new region,
Yeah.
or upcoming region. So
Yeah.
that was interesting. That was 10 years ago. It still is in that sort of position that we got to teach what's going on. The second thing he said was, and it was really good. And I have to now, as a maker of wine in Terroir, Spain, I have to compete with this wine at this price. But let me just dovetail off of that. There are many, many districts of the world that have taken, in my career of 35 years of doing this, that have just come around from not being a bulk juice district. Languedoc's one of them. I mean, they're making some very fine wines of all kinds of varietals down there, and they're rather sophisticated. The other is Puglia, which we're going to be visiting next week. Here was a bulk wine district of Italy, and with amazing terroir, really. Now finally getting accolades about its quality and its sophistication. That took 30 years almost.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think your position is pretty interestingly accurate. That's even possible. In that, if you hold the line, you might stay away from that bulk wine mentality that plagued both of these regions and many more.
Yeah.
And they had to fight to get some kind of worldwide presence on the wine, proverbial wine table. But let me go back to something a little bit about the geophysics of this. And you talked about climate change.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly from the UV situation and the way they canopy the vines, and that Bordeaux's stuck with these grapes and Burgundy's stuck with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and a couple others. And they have to train themselves to deal with the changes in temperature. How does that affect the soil? What happens to the rocks particularly in a place like Grave where it's all rocky? How does that change? Does that radically change the way the grapes are sensing heat and ripening?
Yeah, so I actually spent a month traveling through several regions of France, and I am in love with the Châteauneuf-du-Pape, that area, and then eventually the Contrillon and up to Bordeaux, through Burgundy, and then through Bordeaux. So it is very, very interesting. Think about region as Châteauneuf-du-Pape, right? They have 13 approved grape varieties that they can use in a blend. Of course, each of these grapes have their own personality. For example, one likes heat, like Grenache, it's okay. Under the sun, it doesn't care. The others may not be that susceptible to so much heat. When you have these big rocks, as in a Terroir or Châteauneuf-du-Pape, they are big, literally boulders, and they are almost like white color. They reflect heat up. So in the past, it was very beneficial because it was cool. So grapes will receive the sunlight twice. They will receive it directly from the air, and they will receive it reflected from the rocks back, right? So that was pretty cool. The other thing that is interesting is the soil underneath these big boulders and big rocks. It's not black, so it's still white, which means that it reflects most of the heat up, so it doesn't heat itself that much. So your roots are a little bit cooler, and that allows you to basically develop or keep the acidity for longer, right? So we let it ripen longer and get these juicy, fruity, bigger reds, but on the other side, we can have the beautiful acidity. And depending on which grape variety we use, we can make the blend up to our liking, right? Now, if you go to Burgundy, where there is only one Pinot Noir, then what do, right? Couple of wineries throughout the last maybe 100 years or so, they were doing clonal selection, meaning that they will like a type of this Pinot Noir, and they would clone it to have the same type of this grape. And today this is a problem, because they are comfortable to living in certain condition. They don't have that adaptability to adjust for a little bit warmer, a little bit cooler, a little bit more water, a little bit less water. Whereas non-clonal selection, and there are very few of them today in Burgundy, but non-clonal selection, they are more resilient. The good, I don't know if it doesn't make any fair comparison, but think about your dog breed, right? If you have this very sophisticated small dog that was bred to be this small, they are more susceptible to disease rather than, street dog. Nothing can kill that dog, right? So basically the same goes to wine in some sense. The clonal selection is more susceptible to problems, or the less adaptive to climate change. Whether diversity is always better, even within one grape variety.
That's so interesting. I think it's an ongoing academic argument, and certainly now many Burgundians are not testing other varietals, but in Bordeaux they are testing things like Touriga Nacional to see what happens. And wow, lo and behold, can you imagine like Lafite Rothschild adds Touriga Nacional to their blend? That's probably not in the near future, but certainly the broader Bordeaux appellated wines might include that. And that's going to be a serious act of intervention of all the vintners to try and even make those changes. But let me ask this question. You mentioned it earlier, actually. The Armenian vines have gone through all these seasons, 6,000 years worth of seasons, 150-year-old vines that have survived all kinds of things. There was that cold snap right through the Veuve Clicquot Champagne days in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and I wonder if they sat around the chateau and said, well, we better start testing new grape varietals. We can't live on Pinot Meunier and Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Or do they just, deal with it, which obviously they did. I just find it fascinating. I wonder if those conversations even existed back then. Not that this is a real
Yeah,
question.
I think in the regions like Champagne or Chablis, even Sancerre, it is very cold, and it was always cold, right? So those grape varieties, the problem was they were not ripening. They were resistant to cold during the winter, but the problem was that they were not ripening. That's why all this champagne was created, because you eventually add sugar to it. Otherwise, it's very, very acid-driven wines, right?
That's true.
Now they are living in a fantastic boom because everything ripens.
Yeah.
It is amazing. So Champagne is one of those regions that, oh my God, they will be producing more and more of beautiful champagne. They don't have a problem of vintage. They blend, right? They can always blend amount of one of these three grapes or produce varietal or whatever they want to do. So they are actually happy right now. Let's see for how long, but for now they are happy.
Well, I guess on the flip side of that happiness, now you can grow those grapes in England, and I found
Yes.
some notes from my father on his trip to England, which is a very interesting story. I won't bore you with it now, but you know, all the grape varieties in those days were German, and they were slightly sweet, and that's all they could grow there because the cooler temperatures. And now, they can make. I mean, I've had fabulous sparkling wine from
Yeah.
from the Isle of Wight. Right, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But so let me tell you the story, and then you tell me how this happens. I had a woman on the show, Stephanie Franklin. She was a descendant of a Texan who founded a city called Schenkelville. It's south of Dallas, about southeast of Dallas, about an hour and a half, and obviously not part of the wine trail in Texas, not near Austin, not near
Yeah.
Lubbock, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But she's determined to grow grapes there because her grandfather, I can't remember if it's her grandfather founded this town. It was one of the first cities in America that was for freed slaves post-Civil War.
Hmm.
And so she's intent on producing Schenkelville appellated wines. What would she do to decide what to grow there? What's the process for that?
Oh, great question. She would analyze the soil first. She would
By
understand.
coring
It,
it?
yes, ideally. Yeah. Or if you have like some outcrops or cliff, a little bit, we don't need much. We just need about 10, 15 feet to understand what is going on, because this is how far your roots potentially can go deep, right?
Right.
The problem that we have in Texas overall is we have too much clay. And the clay is very, it has very high, this is technical, I'll go technical, it has very high porosity and very low permeability, meaning it absorbs a lot of water, but that water stays there. Like
Mhm.
think about in your sponges, vice versa, all pores are connected. So you put water goes away, right? Whether in clay, it just absorbs, it swells, but it stays there. It doesn't move anywhere. So grapes don't like that, because grapes don't like their feet wet. If they reach this layer full of water, it's too much water, they swell, and the crop is basically watery. It's not good grape. It's not a grape you can make wine of. So some areas in Texas, like Hill Country, for example, they have that clay layer very, very deep. So they have enough of diverse soil on top of it that is draining very well, despite of high rain seasons and too much water that comes from the atmosphere, it drains out. So that's why you can grow some decent grapes in Texas. Not all of them are decent, but some are.
That's
So
interesting.
yeah.
Sorry, it's because I don't believe that in my studies, and I was invaded by the what's the Texas Alcohol Beverage Control Board here, TABC. They came here, right where I'm sitting,
Yeah.
and audited me on wines we were sending there. And we had featured wines from Lubbock, from the McPherson winery, and it was I thought it was great. But they were all Rhone varietals. And then you go to places like Messina Hof outside of Fredericksburg or Kerrville, and they're growing things like Sagrantino. Was that natural selection by these people? Do you know in Texas? Or they just randomly picked them?
I think it's the natural selection is happening now, because everybody planted whatever they thought they want to drink at some point, or they thought would go right at the beginning. But then now, little by little, they start to see that, hey, these grapes are growing better, less susceptible to rot, for example, or they are not getting burned by this scorching sun that you have in hill country. So naturally, we will adapt to some sort of grapes that will be better. That's why I moved to Texas in 2015 for the first time, and somebody brought Texan wine to me. I was like, yeah, I'm never drinking this again. Of course, that doesn't mean that all of them were bad, but couple that I tried in 2015, I didn't go back.
Yeah.
And now I'm doing this conscious effort to try different wines because I know I can find some good ones. A friend of mine is making Mourvèdre, for example, 100% Mourvèdre. It's beautiful wine. Not every
Yeah.
bit is beautiful because he needs to learn how to adapt to different climate conditions. And sometimes around Fredericksburg, it can be really cold, but hey, there is a great potential there. I tried a couple of Viogniers in Texas. Some of them are still too chewy, but couples were very interesting and preserving this, characteristic Viognier, honeysuckle, these beautiful flavors and aromas. So I think we will see a great wines from Texas very soon. If somebody argue they are not yet there, very soon we will.
You just said two important things, and I'll touch on them both. One of them is whether it's wine, food, restaurants, maybe even consumer products, you can only probably burn your bridge once or twice before you've scared the consumer away. And I'll highlight this locally. There's a restaurant here in Hermosa Beach. We go there all the time. We went one day, and the meat in the sandwich just wasn't good, and we've been reluctant to try it again. And that's just humanity.
Yeah.
And so the same thing is going to happen with wine. And there's a lot of bad Armenian wines. Let's face it. And we were
don't
there
have them in Texas. We are lucky. We just get the best ones.
Yeah, of course.
So my job is easier.
I mean, we know this is the fact. You tasted a Texan wine. You said you'll never go back, and it probably took you many years. There's a restaurant here in the neighborhood that I sometimes went to twice a day for breakfast and lunch. I haven't been there for 10 years because the last time I went, the meat in the hamburger was bad. And so we went the other day. I reluctantly went in, recognized the waitresses. They were so happy to see me after 10 years. And I was glad to say that they changed purveyors and the meat was really good and I'll go back. But it took 10 years to win that confidence back.
Yeah.
And that's why the Armenian trade, there's something happening in the Armenian trade which is not unlike any other part of the world. And that is, in most glaring example, is Napa Valley, where somebody makes a lot of money doing whatever they do, and then they go, I'm going to go retire in the lifestyle of wine, and they go to Napa Valley, they build a big chateau, and then they realize, it's really hard to make money in this business, I'm tired of losing it, and they realize it's really farming, and they don't have a lot of chances to be successful with it. And it's happening in Armenia, and you mentioned it earlier, there's a lot of new brands. I had Mariam Sagatalian from Invino on the show not too long ago, and she's like, we got a lot of new brands coming here.
Yeah.
Are there enough consumers?
It is scary, frankly. It is scary. Especially, one thing is, are there enough consumers? And the other thing is, we are cannibalizing the few things that we have, right? And those few things is authenticity of our land, because there are not many wines in the world where you can sniff it and say, oh, I know where it's coming from, right? And I did that. I took Van Ardy Areni Reserve to restaurant here in Houston that is on a Michelin waitlist.
Wow.
And I took it to their sommelier. We know each other from way back. I went to Rice University for our MBAs together, but I took the wine to him. I was like, I'm not going to tell you what it is. What do you think? You literally could see that his eyes were running around. He's trying to bring some, safe haven, what it is, how I can identify it. And he was like, I have no clue what it is, but I know for sure it is coming from high altitude volcanic soil.
Wow.
This is amazing. This is amazing. Yeah. So I want to, I don't know, if you and I can plead to Armenian government to create some appellations, let's do it, because we need to preserve it. If you want to do experiment, I actually did this, I had a wine tasting here in Texas, and I brought them one wine all RNE, 100% RNE. One is 1,100 meters altitude, and the other one is 1,600 meters altitude, right? So it's 500 meters, about what it is, 1,500 feet difference between one and the other. Both are 100% RNE. They taste completely different, but you can get this volcanic minerality tension in it, but the taste is different. So
Let
I
me ask
want
this.
to preserve that.
Let me ask this question. This is a consumerized question. Maybe your studies as a SOM have presented this to you because of the consumer. Because this is really a consumer reaction question. It's not about.
Yeah.
We understand that. I mean, in Argentina, they've been growing Malbec at all these various altitudes up the Andes.
Fanta
And of course, it makes different wines. But does anybody care? I mean, does the consumer care about it? And I'm saying this tongue in cheek because you and I were talking about soil and the heat exchange of the rocks. Does the consumer care? And I'm going to suggest that most consumers don't really give a crap. They just want to know what tastes good, and that can they rely on that taste from year to year despite the vintages. And so, what have you sensed from that?
I think, and I'll tell you, yes, they do, and I'll tell you why. So you are in a business for a long time, and you see that lately everybody's talking about young people don't drink wine, right?
That's
so
right.
We are worried about the Generation Z or Alpha or whatever will come afterwards, and whether they will drink wine and whether they will jump on the train drinking wine as we do. So first of all, I don't think it's a problem because I didn't drink wine until I went to Argentina, and I was 25 by then. So
well, there's a personal example.
Yes, that's the first thing. Second is the younger generation are curious or care about what it is they consume, right? So instead of just buying whatever $5 wine, they probably would rather buy 10, and the value is irrelevant at this point, just the magnitude, right? If they know that there is a story behind it. So
I agree.
If we can ride that train in Armenia, we have so much to tell. We have such a beautiful stories. Like, just take the Van RD story. I think it's my favorite producer of reds in Armenia at this point. They ring a bell for their wines every morning and evening. That's what they do because they think this vibration. And as a physicist, I can say I understand. They think the vibration helps the wine. Wines like it, and they grow better.
Well,
what a beautiful story, right?
It's a great story. In fact, I have a wine in my cellar here that's from Sardinia, I believe. It's a Sangiovese, and they're the ones that play music, classical music, because the rock and roll, they claim that the grapes don't like rock and roll, which I think is hilarious. But there's the Gen Z thing is interesting, and I think a lot of that has to do with every generation thinks they're unique, and they've got different approaches to everything, and they just repeat the same problems, and that's why history repeats itself. And so the Gen Zs, I believe all generations come to the wine table eventually. They realize it's a connection to the soil and the earth, not maybe deliberately, but it happens. And like I said, they all think they're going through their own special, unique situation and why they do and don't do things. Like the neo-prohibitionists right now, this non-alc movement. Hell, we had prohibition in America, okay? And wine survived that. In fact, it survived fabulously, actually.
Yeah.
And actually came out of it better than it was because places like Napa were founded based on that post-prohibition.
Was it true? I read somewhere that there was more wine sold during Prohibition than before it. Is that
That's
true?
a good question. I've never reviewed that. There certainly was a lot of wine made during Prohibition, and what people don't understand, it was not illegal to drink alcohol. It was illegal to make it for public consumption. You could make virtually all the wine you wanted in your garage.
Yeah.
And so one of the great latent industries of Prohibition were grapes being trained out to the East Coast so people could make wine. And
Yeah.
and one of the great winemakers facilities in Los Angeles is still around, and they survived because of Sacramento wine. But let me go to quickly when we jump on something called a woman, young girl, and this kind of bucks this whole generation, this Gen Z thing. Her name is Jess Drury, and she created a brand only 4 years ago called Winey Baby. Now,
Okay.
if you were to pick an adjective for millennials, it would be experiential, maybe even lazy, But Gen Zs, I gotta tell you, my experience with them in business anyway, they are whiny babies. I mean, seriously. And so she created a brand for Gen Zs called Winey Baby. You can look it up. She just got bought by Gallo. And
Okay.
so this is a huge success story for somebody in the consumer side of wine. She saw this idea. She came up with a name which is appropriate for their generation, and they're flocking to it so much so that a brand like Gallo decided we better jump on this thing because it's going to take off. And I thought that was really interesting. So I think you're right. I think that the romantic side of wine eventually is the lure for every generation, and its historical character and value to our body and our soul, really our soul. So how much of your day now, since you're transitioning from rocks and soil to wine, it sounds like it's an ambition of yours,
Yes.
is spent with wine and spent with your day job?
Um, one thing that you learn in this life, I think it's integrity, right? So I have a full-time job and I'm paid by that job. So 100% of my daytime goes to that job. However, the other 100%,
Yeah,
the other 100%,
yeah,
including the nights and my dreams and everything, goes to wine because I think it's. I discovered this great passion. And it's not only for Armenian wines, but it's also for more carefully produced wines, curated wines. Something, for example, you mentioned that you make wine in Spain. I was in Ribera del Duero about a couple of weeks ago, and I love Ribera wines always, but it struck me as they are having a problem. Although we don't think about Ribera as a problem, right? They have altitude, they can always go higher, it's relatively cooler. But the DO appellation rules are so strict that they cannot pick grape when they think they should pick. They need to wait until the appellations say you can, right? And that makes, for example, Tempranillo is a grape that is early ripening. So until they are allowed to pick the grape, there is no acidity left whatsoever.
wow.
And you will not hear the stories from the big ones like Protos or Cepa 21. They will not tell you that. But if you go to small producers who make 10,000 bottles, they will tell you how much tartaric acid they need to add into the mix because they can't make the wine to even hold for a couple of years unless they add acidity into it, right? What they are trying to do is, and it's very interesting, you talked about different varietals. I think by the appellation, they must use 85% of Tempranillo. Most of the big ones claim that they use 100%, but the smaller ones, they use 15% or as much as they can of Cabernet Sauvignon because it is very acidic wine. So it can help compensate for this acidity. It ripens well, it's a good soil for cab as well, but it has this acidity that can complement Tempranillo and help us drink the Riberas that we like so much, right? So those kind of stories is something that I chase around the world. And my new discovery, I'll tell you, is a Brazilian wine. And I lived in Brazil for 10 years. And at the time, again, it was like, yeah, bring me Argentina or Chile. It's close and it's good. Every year I go for the last 3 or 4 years, I discovered more and more beautifully constructed wines. I'm not sure they will be consistent every year, but because it's new, right? But they are beautiful. I have a friend, he's a geologist who studied in Bordeaux, and he's making his own wine. The brand is Cactus. have a couple of bottles with me right now, and they are beautiful, absolutely beautiful wines.
It's interesting. Brazil, I personally, right soon after I bought the wine of the Mecca for my father, I featured a brand called Marcus James, which cracks me up because many times, especially in those days, when they were bringing wines to America from a region like Brazil or Moldavia or something, they tried to make it sound like it was American.
Oh,
There was one a Moldavian wine it featured called Hickory Ridge. It's like, really? But tell me what you said. You said something earlier. How would you define then the term you use, properly made wine?
I think the role of winemaker is the least intervention. I would never go out and advocate, oh, don't put any fertilizer or any this or any that, because it's not fair. We need to help the wine to blossom into, help grape to blossom into wine. And that's the winemaker job, to make sure that every step is done, least intervention, but right to the wine. And that would be in my understanding of properly made wine. You don't add, you don't subtract, you allow your grapes to talk for themselves.
And that's a good articulate definition, and it leads to this comment. And I brought this up with a lot of French winemakers that have been through the show here, which is, if that's the case, which it should be, then it takes a lot of time to get to that point, so that the vintage is the talking point of the wine from year to year, and not all the emaciations of additives and chemicals and the way you treat wine through the process of making it. And that leads me to a comment by Juliana Ernakian at Karas, Deguila Ernakian. And that is, when Michel Roland went to see if Karas was even sustainable or could be even done in the Arad Valley, was, yes, you can grow grapes here, but we won't know for 100 years, what's going to happen. And I thought, wow, and you should appreciate that as a geologist, that, wow, it takes a long time for the vines to reflect what they're doing, and then to understand what that is, and then go through so many emaciations of the terroir changes, that now we understand how this wine is going to be. And that leads to the definition: there's no bad vintages. If you know that much,
Exactly.
there's no bad. There's ones that taste better than others, or that you appreciate rather than others, but all of them will reflect, a properly made wine reflects that place.
To that point, a couple of months ago, I was in Finger Lakes, and Finger Lakes.
But you get around.
Yes. And Finger Lakes is this iconic place in the United States, right?
Yeah.
First of all, the Dr. Constantine Frank and all the history of him bringing the Vitis vinifera and etc. But one wine was very curious for me, and it's a Hillick hops. So they are very young winery. I think they have 3 or 4 vintages in a bottle. So it's probably like 10 years old wine by now. And I had the opportunity to have this small vertical tasting, 2000, I think it was 19, 20, 21, and 22, something like that, if I'm not mistaken. And 19, again, if memory serves me well, was very bad year. It was cold, it was rainy, it was not very, very pleasant. Against 22, that was an absolutely fantastic year for the wines, right? And you taste this austerity in a wine versus the plush, and we're talking about Riesling, dry Riesling,
Yes,
right?
right.
So you can taste the austerity in a wine of 2019 and the splushness and ripeness in 2022. However, it's not a bad wine. It's just different.
That's right.
So
Bravo.
and I don't want consistent wine, because my life is not consistent. My year is not the same last year or this year, right? We are getting older. We feel differently. We want different things. We want more of this and less of that. Why my wine should be the same year after year, right?
That's a good point.
I want this excitement of opening the bottle and don't know what to expect and let it surprise me.
I think that's the fundamental difference. And we all need the wines that are in the supermarkets, the Joshes and the Apothecaries, and those are vinted and bottled and sugared so that they taste the same. But there's also a not a movement, but there's also a functionality in study that shows that people will get bored of that. They got bored of White Zinfandel in 1974. They'll get bored of that palate and they'll seek other things, and the complexity of a wine you're talking about will eventually come to the table. And there's always the argument that wine should react to the consumer, which I don't agree with.
Yeah.
And the consumer needs to react to the wine, as you just stated very nicely, in that my life is not stable and consistent year to year. Why should the wines be? Why can't they reflect something different? So we're at the end of our time here, but I wanted to sort of point this out and get your opinion on the Armenian trade just for a second. Through this conversation, we discussed many little districts that are emerging districts. You just mentioned Brazilian wines. I mean, they've been around forever. Like I said, I featured one probably 20 years ago, and really no movement on the shelves here in America. Mexico's another one. The Valle de Guadalupe is hugely popular now for resorts, cuisine, and now wines coming to America really slow. I mean, really slow. The Finger Lakes is another one. I mean, they've been around forever. I visited in 1994. I went to Millbrook, New York, and I watched them, prune the vines in 3 feet of snow. Going, what are you doing? Like, what are you nuts?
Yeah.
But another place that is emerging, but man, it's so hard to get traction. Friuli, even that part between Slovenia and Italy, to try to make headwinds in American wine shelves is not easy. And we haven't even talked about Croatia, which has incredible wines coming to the U.S., which is one of the biggest markets in the world. How is Armenia going to do this? What do you think the path is? Is the Vine and Wine Foundation, the government side, going to be the crux of all this, the fulcrum to make things work, or is it going to be the vintners? What do you think?
I have two parts for that. First of all, let me share very, very quickly my passion that I'm working on right now, precisely because of what you said, right? You probably know, but most of people don't, that every state in the United States produces wine.
Mhm.
Every state, including Alaska, Hawaii, Utah, any of them, right? How much do we know? Like, I'm in Texas, I know Texan wine, and I know California, Washington, Oregon. That's about it, right? And then the same is they know their own wines, and then California, Washington, and Oregon. Because I think it's incredibly unfair, and places like Finger Lakes or Arizona or Michigan, they need to get some spotlight. I'm building my Pour Across America Wine Club, and I will be traveling around those states, selecting the wines and delivering to my subscribers. And it will be within the certain price range, the best I can find. And it's not only about the quality, it's also about the story, sustainable practices, and everything like that, right? So that's the one thing. The second thing for Armenian wines, I think it will take our diaspora to step up, and not just to drink it, but to do what you are doing, right?
Mhm.
Invite people, talk about Armenian wine, try to promote the good wines and create this differentiation of why this is a good wine, why it should be on your table. And I don't think we need to replace neither Friuli or Puglia. We just add to this mix for the people who are curious, who are
Mhm.
open to trying something new. And believe me, I found so many people around me who tried my wines, well, not my wine, Armenian wines, who tried Armenian wines, who went and bought bottles after it, and who texted me, oh my God, my mom loved it, or, this was amazing, I served it at this table. So it will be slow, but it takes a lot of legwork.
It's very slow. I want to add to your Pour Across America list of things to investigate.
Okay.
I read about this gentleman in the Smithsonian Magazine. His name is Eisterhold, and the winery is called Terravox, Terravox.
Okay.
And he actually, I think he found some of these rootstocks in Texas, but he read a book from the 1800s about the grapes that were being grown in America pre-prohibition, and as you know,
Yeah.
the Midwest of America is actually sort of the cradle of wine
Ohio,
consumption at the
right?
beginning, right? Yeah, Ohio, Louisiana, Texas, Kansas. So he had planted 14 uh, indigenous, what would be quote unquote indigenous wine grapes of America. They're not Vitis vinifera, but they're what they made wine from in America.
Yeah, they're
He's
hybrids or
already
lines, so.
right, and he's already supplanted 4 varietals. You're like, just can't make anything you can drink out of these 4 wines, but he has 12 or 10 other varietals that he's growing in Kansas.
Yeah.
And representing a section of the wine trade in America that's really been unexplored.
Yeah.
And so maybe if you taste the wines, I'm not going to comment on their relative quality, because one thing I did tell him, I said, man, you have a lot of legwork to do, because grapes that are unknown and what they're going to do, and soil that's unknown and what it's going to do. But he's built a winery, he's got an experience, and it's called Terroir. Anyway, Pour Across America. Is there a website for Pour Across America?
Yes, it's www.pouracrossamerica.com altogether.
And the listeners, go ahead, check it out. And if you need any consultation when it comes to direct-to-consumer wine sales, we did it for a long time, so I can help you. 35 years. Such a pleasure having on the show, and it's so glad we could catch up. It took a little while to get us organized, but very interesting. I'd like to circle back in a few months when Pour Across America's got legs, and you can tell us what's going on.
Yeah, my first delivery is going out in November. It's only here in Houston because I'm still small and growing, and the first region is Finger Lakes. So every quarter will be a different state.
So I can tell you, my first job, I worked for my dad's wine shop in the 70s as a teenager. The day I got my license, and I turned 16, I guess this was illegal actually, I delivered in my dad's van the shipments of the wine of the month, the original Wine of the Month Club. Now, by then I was already a couple years old, but my very first job with a license was to deliver the club selection. So you've got a lot of room ahead of you to grow this, and congratulations on getting it started, because it's a lot of work.
Thank you. It's a lot of work, but it's very exciting talking to winemakers, and I collect so many beautiful stories. For example, one of the wine that I wanted to bring, and I just have 24 subscribers for now, right? It's just 2 cases. One of the winemakers told me he doesn't have them. I cannot get it. He produced such a small amount of wine that I traveled to Finger Lakes in June. I wanted to buy them in September. He didn't have them anymore.
Wow.
It's beautiful.
I love this because it's history repeating itself. My father went to Napa Valley in 1973 and was climbing over pallets of wine with Warren Winiarski at Stag's Leap. And my dad says, I'll take this wine. He goes, I don't have enough.
Yeah.
Now, we were small then too, but that's 50 years ago. And it's the same conversation. It's really cool. That's really cool.
Yes, I was like, okay, let me get some allocation for next year. I'll drink it by myself.
And get used to that, by the way. So just so you know, not only will you have that, you'll have the wine arrive and it wasn't what you ordered, or that it went through I had a whole container, I had a whole truck, 17 pallets of wine bake on a truck just from Paso Robles to Southern California.
To that point, the other thing is my subscribers are asking, why November? Why can't you deliver now in October? I cannot bring them to Texas. Nobody shipped them to me right now because it's hot. So have you ever heard about FedEx saying, no, I'm not shipping, it's hot? They don't care.
They don't care, but there is a movement, not a movement, but there's a shipping companies that now have algorithms that will balance shipments across the states that don't have heat and then have heat, and then they'll release shipments that were it's an integral part of software these days for shipping wine. I never had a problem.
I appreciate that, actually. I appreciate my winemaker to tell me you will have to wait when it's safe to ship my wines. I appreciate that.
The thing we had, and we were shipping 60,000 bottles a month, was I would ship them if they froze because FedEx and UPS do not have temperature controlled warehouses. So the cork will pop on a very, very cold day, and the wine will seep on a very, very warm day. But we had such little, because it happens so fast, it just passes through those states. But I think it's prudent. I think it's prudent to do that because it's not worth, again, we talked about earlier, that one taste that somebody goes, oh, this is terrible. And the reason it was terrible is it was baked or had been frozen and didn't survive. So I think you're doing the right thing.
No, it's a great journey, as you said, and I'm looking forward to learn more from you.
Anytime. Cheers. Thank you for the time today, and cheers on your career, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me.